"Hush now, little one," Sarah McKenna whispered, her calloused hand resting on her swollen belly as she struggled with a heavy wooden beam. "Mama's building us a home." Her voice drifted across the Arizona desert like a prayer. From the ridge above, Jake Sullivan lowered his spyglass, unaware that this pregnant widow was the wife of the man his own brother had killed just 3 months ago. In the brutal Arizona territory of 1885, 24-year-old Sarah McKenna fought to build a barn with her bare hands. Her husband Thomas died in a horse accident 3 months back, leaving her alone, pregnant, and desperate to finish shelter for her cattle before winter hit. Every dawn brought the same back-breaking routine: lifting timber, hammering nails, fighting, exhaustion. Without the barn, she'd lose her cattle. Without cattle, she'd lose the land. It was all she had left of the life she'd built with Thomas. Jake Sullivan watched from the hills, a drifter drawn by curiosity at seeing a pregnant woman doing such brutal work. Days turned to weeks, and curiosity became something deeper. He saw strength in her that he'd lost long ago, the will to fight when everything seemed hopeless. He kept his distance but offered secret protection, scaring off predators at night and leaving supplies by her fence. What Jake didn't know was the terrible truth. Sarah McKenna was Thomas McKenna's widow, the same Thomas his drunk brother Billy had shot dead over a poker game in Tombstone. "Your daddy would be proud," Sarah murmured, wrestling another beam into place. Sweat mixed with dust on her face. Despite the October chill, Jake's chest tightened watching her. Thomas McKenna had been a good man who didn't deserve to die over $50, and Billy's temper. Jake had tried to stop his brother that night, but the gunshot echoed through the saloon, and Thomas crumpled to the floor, leaving behind this pregnant wife and half-built dreams. That's why Jake had ridden out here, to see what remained of the man his brother destroyed. He'd expected an abandoned ranch. Instead, he found Sarah McKenna, 8 months pregnant and swinging a hammer like she was building salvation one nail at a time. The barn was taking shape, 3 walls up, the 4th her biggest challenge yet. Working by moonlight, Jake quietly reinforced joints and added support where needed, careful to keep his help subtle. Sarah's pride was fierce. She needed to feel this was her achievement. As he worked in darkness, Jake hummed the same lullaby he'd heard Sarah sing. The melody stirred something he thought Billy's violence had killed, the possibility of gentleness, of building instead of destroying. Sarah had noticed the mysterious overnight improvements. Someone was watching over her property, but strangely, she didn't feel threatened. Whoever it was understood her need for independence while keeping her safe. As October nights grew colder and her pregnancy reached its final weeks, both Sarah and her unknown guardian faced a crisis that would shatter the careful distance they'd maintained. The barn was nearly complete, but Sarah's greatest test approached. Jake would have to choose between guilt over his brother's crime and his growing need to protect the woman whose husband Billy had stolen from her. In the harsh Arizona territory, some secrets were too heavy to carry alone, and some connections too powerful to deny. The scream cut through the desert dawn like a knife. Jake bolted upright from his bedroll, grabbing his rifle as Sarah's cry echoed from the valley below. Through the morning mist, he saw her collapse beside the barn, one hand clutching her belly, the other reaching desperately for a fallen timber beam. "The baby," she gasped to the empty air. "Please, not yet." Jake was down the hillside before conscious thought kicked in, his boots sliding on loose rock as he abandoned weeks of careful distance. Sarah's face was pale as desert sand, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Ma'am, I'm here to help," he said, dropping to his knees beside her. Sarah's green eyes snapped open, fear replacing pain for a moment. "Who are you? How long have you been—" "That doesn't matter right now." Jake's voice was gentle but firm. "Can you stand?" She nodded, gripping his offered hand. As he helped her to her feet, Jake noticed the way she instinctively trusted him, as if her body recognized safety, even when her mind questioned it. "The beam slipped," she explained, one hand still pressed to her side. "I was trying to set the final support for the roof when—" Another sharp intake of breath cut her words short. Jake examined the fallen timber. It would have taken 2 strong men to position properly. Sarah had been attempting it alone, 8.5 months pregnant, in the pre-dawn darkness. "You could have been killed," he said quietly. "I have to finish it." Sarah's voice carried quiet desperation. "Winter's coming, and the cattle need shelter. If I lose them, I lose everything." Jake looked at the nearly completed barn, then at the woman who'd built it with nothing but determination and calloused hands. The 4th wall needed just 2 more support beams to be complete. A day's work for him, impossible for Sarah in her condition. "Your husband teach you construction?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Pain flickered across Sarah's features. "Thomas was going to help me finish it. We planned it together last spring." She touched her belly. "He wanted the barn done before the baby came." Guilt twisted in Jake's chest like a rusty knife. Thomas McKenna had planned to be here, raising this barn, welcoming his child. Instead, he was buried in Tombstone's Boot Hill because Billy Sullivan couldn't handle losing at cards. "Mom, I know this might sound forward, but I've been traveling through and I've got time. Let me help you finish this." Sarah studied his face, weathered by sun and wind, marked by some deep sadness she couldn't name. Something in his eyes reminded her of Thomas, not in appearance, but in the quiet way he carried himself. "I don't even know your name." "Jake Sullivan." The surname felt like poison on his tongue. "Sarah McKenna." She extended her hand, calloused and strong despite its delicate size. "My husband was Thomas McKenna." Jake's heart nearly stopped. She spoke her husband's name with such love, such pride. If she knew who Jake really was, that handshake would become a slap across his face. "Thomas was a good man," Jake managed, the words true even as they burned his throat. "You knew him?" "Heard tell of him in Tombstone. Folks spoke well of him." Sarah's smile was the first genuine one Jake had seen from her. He was planning to expand the ranch, maybe start breeding horses. This barn was just the beginning. Each word was a knife twisting deeper. Thomas McKenna had dreams, plans, a future stolen by Billy's drunken rage. Now those dreams fell to a pregnant widow and a nameless drifter carrying his killer's blood. "Well, then," Jake said, rolling up his sleeves, "let's build something Thomas would be proud of." They worked in comfortable silence, Sarah directing while Jake provided the muscle she lacked. She was a natural engineer, understanding load distribution and structural integrity better than most men he'd worked with. Thomas had taught her well. As the sun climbed higher, painting the desert gold and crimson, the final support beam slid into place. The barn was complete, solid, weatherproof, ready for winter. "Thank you," Sarah said, standing back to admire their work. "I couldn't have done it alone." Jake nodded, already planning his departure. He'd helped her finish what Thomas started. Now he needed to disappear before she learned the truth about why her husband never came home. But as Sarah placed both hands on her belly and smiled with pure joy, Jake realized leaving might be the hardest thing he'd ever done. "Jake?" Sarah's voice was uncertain. "Would you stay for dinner? It's the least I can offer after what you've done." The invitation hung between them like a bridge, one that could lead to redemption or destruction, depending on how much truth it could bear. Sarah's cabin was smaller than Jake expected, but warm with candlelight and the smell of cornbread baking. She moved carefully around the kitchen, one hand always resting on her belly, preparing what was probably the first meal she'd shared with another person since Thomas died. "Sit," she commanded gently, nodding toward the wooden table Thomas had, clearly crafted by hand. "You've done enough work for one day." Jake took the offered chair, his eyes drawn to a framed photograph on the mantel. Thomas McKenna smiled back at him, young, hopeful, with his arm around a radiant Sarah in a white dress. Their wedding day, probably just 2 years ago. "That was taken in Tucson," Sarah said, following his gaze. "Thomas said I looked like an angel in that dress." Her voice carried no bitterness, only love for a man who couldn't love her back anymore. "He was right," Jake said quietly. Sarah blushed, ladling stew into 2 bowls. Thomas used to say the sweetest things. Even when he was angry about something, he'd still tell me I was beautiful." She paused, spoon halfway to the pot. "How did he die, Jake? I mean, what did people in Tombstone say about the accident?" Jake's blood turned to ice water. "Accident? The wild horses. Sheriff Morrison said Thomas was trying to break a Mustang and got thrown, hit his head on a rock." Sarah's voice grew smaller. "He said it was quick, that Thomas didn't suffer. The lie hit Jake like a physical blow. Sheriff Morrison had covered up the truth, probably to spare Sarah the pain of knowing her husband died over a card game. But the deception meant she'd never gotten justice, never known what really happened in that Tombstone saloon. "Sarah," Jake started, then stopped. "How do you tell a pregnant widow that her husband was murdered, that the man sitting at her table shared blood with his killer? What is it?" Sarah noticed his hesitation, setting down her spoon. "Jake, you look like you've seen a ghost." Before Jake could answer, Sarah gasped sharply, her hands flying to her belly. Her face contorted with pain as she gripped the edge of the table. "The baby," she whispered. "Something's wrong." Jake was beside her in an instant. "How long between the pains?" "This is the first real one, but I've been having smaller ones all day." Sarah's breathing became rapid and shallow. "It's too early. The baby isn't due for another month." Jake had helped birth foals and calves on various ranches, but a human baby was different territory entirely. Still, Sarah needed help, and he was the only person within 50 miles. "Let's get you to the bed," he said, supporting her weight as they moved toward the bedroom. Sarah's cabin had one main room and a small bedroom barely large enough for the bed Thomas had built. As Jake helped her lie down, another contraction hit, stronger than the first. "Jake," Sarah gripped his hand with surprising strength. "I'm scared. Without Thomas, if something happens to me, the baby—" "Nothing's going to happen to you," Jake said firmly. "I've delivered plenty of animals, and babies aren't much different. We just need to take it slow and steady." Over the next hour, Sarah's labor progressed rapidly. Between contractions, she talked about Thomas, their plans for the ranch, the names they'd chosen for the baby, the life they'd dreamed of building together. Each word was another weight on Jake's conscience. "Thomas wanted to name him Samuel if it's a boy," Sarah panted during a brief respite. "After his father, and Emily if it's a girl, after my mother. Those are good names," Jake managed, wiping sweat from Sarah's forehead with a damp cloth. "Thomas said he wanted to teach our son to be honorable, to stand up for what's right even when it's hard." Sarah's eyes found Jake's. "He said there were too many cowards in the world who let bad things happen because they're afraid to act." The words cut deeper than any knife. Jake was exactly the kind of coward Thomas McKenna would have despised. A man who let his brother kill innocent people and then ran away instead of facing justice. As dawn approached, Sarah's son was born, small but healthy, with his mother's green eyes and what looked like his father's stubborn chin. Jake wrapped the baby in a clean blanket and placed him in Sarah's arms. "Hello, Samuel," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Your daddy would have loved you so much." Jake stepped back, watching mother and child in the candlelight. This was what Billy had destroyed. Not just a man's life, but a family's future. Samuel McKenna would grow up without his father because Billy Sullivan couldn't handle losing at poker. "Jake," Sarah said softly, "I don't know how to thank you. You saved us both tonight." Jake nodded, unable to speak. He'd helped bring Thomas McKenna's son into the world, but he was still the brother of the man who'd made Samuel an orphan before he was even born. As the first light of dawn crept through the cabin windows, Jake made a decision that would change everything. Sarah deserved to know the truth about her husband's death, even if it meant losing the only family he'd found in years. But first, he had to find the courage to destroy the peace he'd helped create. 3 days after Samuel's birth, Jake sat on Sarah's porch, whittling a small wooden horse, while she nursed the baby inside. He'd been rehearsing the words for hours, but none of them felt right. "How do you confess that your blood runs through the veins of a killer?" Sarah emerged from the cabin, Samuel sleeping peacefully in her arms. He's got Thomas's stubborn streak already, she said with a tired smile. Refuses to sleep unless someone's holding him. Jake set down his carving. Sarah, we need to talk. Something in his tone made her pause. What's wrong? Your husband wasn't killed by wild horses. The words hung in the desert air like a death sentence. Sarah's face went pale, her grip tightening protectively around her son. What do you mean? Jake's hands trembled as he pulled out a worn newspaper clipping he'd carried for 3 months. This is from the tombstone epitaph. Thomas was shot in a saloon over a poker game. Sarah read the article with growing horror, her free hand covering her mouth. But Sheriff Morrison said, he told me it was an accident. Morrison lied to spare you the pain. Thomas was murdered by a drunk cowboy named Billy Sullivan. Jake's voice cracked on his brother's name. Billy's my younger brother. Sarah, I'm the brother of the man who killed your husband. The newspaper clipping fluttered to the ground as Sarah staggered backward. No, that's not. You helped me build the barn. You delivered my baby. You can't be. I came here to see what Billy had destroyed. I expected to find an empty ranch. Instead, I found you. Jake stood slowly, his hands raised peacefully. I've been watching over you because I knew what my brother took from you. From Samuel, Sarah's eyes blazed with a fury Jake had never seen. Get away from us. Get away from my son. Sarah, please, you're his uncle. The words came out like venom. Samuel's father is dead because of your family, and you've been lying. To me for weeks. Jake nodded, accepting her rage. I know. I've been trying to find the courage to tell you. Billy was drunk, angry about losing money. I tried to stop him, but you didn't. Sarah's voice was ice cold. Your brother murdered my husband, and you did nothing. You're right, I was a coward. I let Billy ride away, and I've been running from what he did ever since. Jake pulled out a small leather pouch and set it on the porch railing. This is what Billy won that night. $50 that cost Thomas his life. It belongs to you. Sarah stared at the pouch like it was a snake. You think money makes this right? No, nothing makes this right. Jake walked toward his horse, tied near the completed barn. But I want you to know that watching you these past weeks, seeing your strength, your love for Thomas and Samuel, it's shown me what kind of man I should have been. Where are you? Going? Jake swung into his saddle. To find Billy, to bring him back to face justice for what he did. And if you don't find him, then I'll keep looking until I die trying. Jake touched his hat brim. Thomas was a good man who deserved better. So do you and Samuel. As Jake rode toward the horizon, Sarah stood on the porch, holding her son, watching the man who'd saved them both disappear into the desert. The wooden horse he'd been carving lay forgotten on the porch, a toy for a fatherless boy, made by the hands of his father's killer's brother. 6 months later, Sheriff Morrison rode up to Sarah's ranch with news. Billy Sullivan had been found in Mexico and brought back to stand trial. He'd been sentenced to hang for Thomas McKenna's murder. The testimony that sealed his fate came from his own brother, Jake Sullivan, who'd tracked him for 3,000 miles to bring him to justice. Jake never returned to the ranch, but every few months, Sarah would find small gifts left by her fence, carved toys for Samuel, supplies for the winter, wildflowers picked from the desert. The ghost who'd watched over them from the hills had found his own way to honor Thomas McKenna's memory. Sarah kept the wooden horse on Samuel's dresser, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, redemption was possible. Some wound could never fully heal, but sometimes, just sometimes, the truth could set everyone free. In the harsh Arizona territory, where justice was often as rare as water, Jake Sullivan had chosen truth over comfort, accountability over escape. And in doing so, he'd given Thomas McKenna's family something more valuable than any barn, the knowledge that his death hadn't been forgotten and that justice, however delayed, had finally come home. Have you ever faced a moment where telling the truth could destroy everything you'd built? Where doing the right thing meant losing someone you loved? Share your thoughts in the comments below about redemption, forgiveness, and the power of facing our hardest truths. If this story moved, you hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of courage, love, and redemption from the American frontier. These stories remind us that heroism isn't about never making mistakes. It's about finding the strength to make things right. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to choose honor over comfort. What other untold stories of the Old West would you like to see? Drop your suggestions below and let's keep exploring the human heart in the wildest places. Until next time, remember, true courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right despite that fear.